wydawnictwo. No, pierwsze wydanie to prawda okładka, pierwszy wszystko przekłada.
Widać mnie?
To samo.
Jest okej.
Szanowni Państwo, Szanowni Państwo, bardzo serdecznie witam w Żydowskim Muzeum Galicja. Szanowni Państwo, konferencja będzie prowadzona w dwóch językach. Pierwszy wykład będzie w języku polskim i będzie tłumaczony na język angielski. Natomiast kolejne panele będą już w języku angielskim, tłumaczone na język polski. Więc ci z Państwa, którzy potrzebują tłumaczenia na język angielski, na razie podczas pierwszego wykładu można śmiało nie korzystać z słuchawek, potem będzie przerwa, a potem będą słuchawki z tyłu i można sobie skorzystać. Ladies and gentlemen, the first lecture will be in Polish and will be translated to English. So for the first lecture, please help yourself, if you don't speak Polish, help yourself with the headsets. And then the second and the other lectures will be already in English translated to Polish. So again, if you don't speak Polish for the first lecture, please help yourself with the headsets. I will be speaking in English. Więc jeszcze raz, ci z Państwa, którzy nie mówią po angielsku, bardzo proszę zabrać słuchawki. Szanowni Państwo, nazywam się Jakub Nowakowski, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jakub Nowakowski. I'm the director of the Galician Jewish Museum, and this is my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you here in the room, but also to welcome all of the viewers who are watching this conference through Galician Jewish Museum YouTube channel. The theme of the conference is Jewish resistance in Krakow during the Holocaust, and it's not a coincidence that we're doing it here and now. Here at the Galician Jewish Museum, the issue of the resistance was always important for us. It was always the story that would be part of the narration we would be conveying, whether through the core exhibition or temporary exhibitions. And actually, more than 10 years ago, 14 years ago, we've already had a first exhibition about Jewish resistance in Krakow. The catalog of this exhibition is here, and you can buy it. That's a product placement in our bookstore. So it's important for us. It's important for me as a Krakowian. I was born and raised here in Krakow, and none of those stories, the stories of the Jewish resistance, would be part of my story. None of the stories of the heroes of the resistance, of Gusta and Szymszon and many other who were considering themselves to be a Polish Jews. None of those stories would be told to me, a Krakowian, throughout any parts of my education process. And it was important for me to be working on that subject and bringing back this story to us, to Krakowians, because this is most of all part of our story. The conference today is happening because of many partners and many people, and I would like to first of all highlight our partners from Yad Vashem and Mr. Doron Shach, who has been mover and shaker in terms of putting this program together. I would like to thank him and his colleagues back at the Yad Vashem. I would like to also thank my colleagues from the education department, most of all Katarzyna Suszkiewicz and the entire team of the Galician Jewish Museum Education Department. The conference part of the conference will take place here on the ground. But then at 2:30 p.m. we also invite you to a guided tour, which will be led by, again, Doron Shach, that will be devoted to the issue of Jewish resistance. And this guided tour will end around 4:30 p.m. today at the Spitalna 38. And Spitalna 38 is, once again, not just a random place or random address. This is a place where 8 years ago, almost exactly 8 years ago, on December 22nd of 1942, the members of the Jewish Fighting Organization, members of different Jewish underground organizations, attacked the cafeteria called Cyganeria, which was only for German soldiers. And we're ending up there because the 22nd December is coming quickly, and we want to commemorate the heroism of those young girls and boys. If you are aware of how the story is being told, or the history of, or if you're aware of Krakow, you know that the plaque that is there is a bit old. And actually involves a lot of information, out of which most are not true. And this has been a problem, this has been an issue. The plaque been talking about Gwardia Ludowa, so the communist underground. The plaque is talking about December 24th, not December 22nd. And that was clearly an errors, mistakes that been made because of the context, historical context when the plaque was installed. The plaque was installed in the communist era and was to prove certain political statements rather than to depict the real story. And now we're very proud to say that because of the collaboration, again, with our friends in Israel, in Yad Vashem, but also collaboration with the Institute of the National Memory, on the 22nd, we will be inviting all of you to unveiling of the new plaque that will replace the old plaque, and we will finally, after all those years, be correcting and telling the actual story in a very symbolic way, but nevertheless, finally, after all those years, mentioning the right people in the right time and the right story. So again, please look for information, for invitation, but December 22nd, we think we will once again meet on Spitalna 38. So that's pretty much all from my end. Again, this is a great privilege and honor to be seeing all of you here, to be hosting this conference. And now I would like to invite Mr. Dani Dayan, chairman of the Yad Vashem, who couldn't be here with us, but has sent a video to say a few words.
In Krakow and all over Europe. I want to stress the importance
introduce Katarzyna Suszkiewicz, head of the education department of the Galicia Jewish Museum, who will then introduce our first speaker. Thank you, Eddie.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to be here and to introduce our first speaker, Katarzyna Zimmerer, Polish journalist and writer, translator from German, columnist for many periodicals, and a person who, as the first one, I believe, wrote about the ghetto in this whole complexity and put it all together in her book, The Murdered Word, some time ago already, but she published much more in between, and she will tell us about Krakow Ghetto. She will give us the outline, the events we will speak about the core of today's conference. Kasiu, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very sorry I don't speak English. My task is to tell you shortly about the history of the Krakow ghetto. And I will do it. Let me just open my glasses box. Before the outbreak of the Second World War, there were over 60,000 Jews in Krakow, who constituted 1/4 of the population of the city. When the Germans took over Krakow, a decree was issued in July 1940 that only 12,000 Jewish workers can remain in Krakow. The rule was that elderly people could also stay, orphans could stay, and this displacement action in 1940 lasted virtually till March 1941, and they were carried out very chaotically. In March 1941, according to the decree of the Otto Wachter, the Krakow governor of the Krakow district, the so-called Jewish residential quarter was established, which was located in Podgórze, in the area of Podgórze, so not in the historical Jewish quarter of Krakow, but across the Vistula River, and the removal to the ghetto was to take place by the 20th of March at the latest, which meant, of course, the displacement or the removal of ethnically Polish inhabitants of the Podgórze area of the future ghetto to the so-called Aryan side of the city. Here we have a photograph of people moving to the ghetto, people in ulica Miodowa and Kazimierz, now people descending from the bridge in ulica Piłsudskiego. You can see a map of the ghetto. The ghetto was relatively small, just a few streets, around 320 houses. Most of these houses, the apartments had just one room without a kitchen. Most of these houses were that simple, and around 3,500 people used to live in that area by that time, and now around 12,000 Jewish people had to move into the same area, and some additional 3,000 Jews who stayed in Krakow illegally. 4 gates led into the ghetto. The main one was located in ulica Limanowskiego Street, and number 2 at the end of that street, and there were also 2 other gates, one in Lwowska Street and one in the Zgoda Square, in the main ghetto square. And as you can see in the map, in the plan of the ghetto, some of the houses located along the streets like Nadwiślańska or Traugutta or Ostwosza were in the ghetto, yet the houses located by them were in the ghetto, yet the streets themselves were not in the ghetto. So the first difficulty, in addition to the crowdedness of those houses, a system had to be invented of connections, passages through cellars, through basements, that would allow people to enter their houses, their apartments. A wall was built around the ghetto. Now we can see a wall on the Krzemionki Hill. I forgot to tell you that the Krzemionki Hill in the south was the only green area, the only greenery in the ghetto on the Krzemionki Hills. So when the wall was being erected, Julian Aleksandrowicz, a doctor, wrote in his diary, then the oppressors built the wall in the shape of a matzevot, of tombstones, to humiliate the residents of the ghetto even more. Here we see the main gate to the ghetto by the main market square of Podgórze, and the inscription Yiddish Wohnbezirk, because one of the decrees which complicated people's life in the ghetto stipulated that all the inscriptions in the so-called residential area are to be written in Yiddish, because many people did not Yiddish. Trams number 3 and 6 passed the ghetto. German soldiers stepped on the tram at the entrance to the ghetto, but sometimes, as witnesses said, it was possible to throw out a package of food onto the street in the ghetto. As I said, this picture shows the ground floor windows being bricked up in those houses that overlooked the Aryan side, or were located along the streets that where the streets themselves were not in the ghetto. Getting out of the ghetto from March 1941 was prohibited by law, was punishable by law. The ghetto was guarded by the Polish blue police on the outside, and the police often requisitioned whatever people tried to get into the ghetto, but at the same time the police were very corruptible, and if you knew who to bribe, then you could manage to smuggle a few things into the ghetto. Order in the ghetto was kept by the so-called Jewish police, Ordnungsdienst, which in short in Polish was called Odemand. In the initial period of the ghetto, its inhabitants worked mostly outside the Jewish ghetto, which was important, especially that it allowed better contact with the city, with non-Jewish Polish acquaintances, allowed trading goods. This ended later, but I will speak of it later. In the ghetto, as the Gazeta Żydowska, the Jewish Gazette, indicates, lively cultural life existed, which was organized mostly by the social department of the Judenrat, the Jewish Council. These concerts, but sometimes theater shows, ballet spectacles, for example, were organized in the orphanage or in the children's center in the former Cuka synagogue in ulica Węgierska, Węgierska Street. But after a few months, one hall was redone in the former Optima chocolate factory, also in Węgierska Street, which had been in ruin, and a proper concert hall was organized there with a stage. And as I said, profits from those cultural events were directed for charity purposes, for example, the orphanage, or the elderly house, or the children's center, and supporting the poor. Religious Jews, as it seems, did not stop their religious practices in the ghetto. Despite the official prohibition, they would gather for prayer together. In the initial period, in the first year of the ghetto, on the most important holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and later Pesach, common prayers were held, first in the Jewish orphanage house, also in a newly redone hall in the Optima factory. Stella Milamade, in her memoirs, wrote that she was very irritated by watching those Jewish boys with peyot, with side locks, because she was assimilated. They looked strange to her. As you know, eating bread is not allowed on Pesach, and she would ostentatiously eat bread on Pesach. The first year of the ghetto, you could say, life in the ghetto went along relatively peacefully, which changed at the beginning of June 1942, when the first mass action operation, displacement operation, was carried out, which lasted till the 10th of June 1942, and it is estimated that 5,000 Jews were then deported to the Bełżec extermination camp. After the June displacement resettlement, the area of the ghetto was diminished. I don't know if you can see it, but the streets from ulica Limanowskiego running in the center to the southern border, to the Krzemianki Hill, was excluded from the ghetto, and people had to move. New hassles erupted over who is to live and where. The Jewish orphanage also had to be moved, and the elderly house had to be moved, and the epidemic hospital had to be moved from Rynkawka Street. Also, gradually, news became reaching Krakow about the extermination camp in Bełżec, and that the resettlement is no resettlement in fact, and that people are being sent to gas chambers. But then people still wouldn't believe this news. The next action, the next operation, took place on the 28th October 1942, and this was an action extraordinarily brutal, because 600 people were killed on the spot. The Jewish orphanage was liquidated, and the house of the elderly was liquidated. Babies were killed on the spot. Elderly people were also killed on the spot. And again, around 6,000 people were sent from the Krakow ghetto to Bełżec, to the extermination camp. After the October action, the ghetto, this diminished ghetto, was divided further into parts A and Part B. Part A was for those who worked, who employed, who had some jobs, and Part B was inhabited by those who were not employed, who did not work, who were not allocated to any work. I spoke about the action from the 28th of October 1942, but I remember that from July 1942, the areas of the two Jewish cemeteries in ulica Abrahama Jerozolimska, work was begun to create a camp for Jews. Originally the work was difficult, but gradually more and more people were employed in the so-called Barackenbau, a work unit that constructed barracks. More and more people from the ghetto were transferred to the Plaszów area. In March 1943, Amungert became the commandant of the Plaszów camp, and he really began to accelerate the speed of work on the construction of the camp. And the 13th of March, he decreed that all the people from part A of the ghetto were to be transferred to the camp. This transfer was carried out very brutally, and children up to the age of 15 were to stay in ghetto B, part B of the ghetto. It quite often happened that people would carry small babies asleep in the backpacks, and it often happened that German soldiers would stab these rucksacks with bayonets. It is estimated that around 15,000 people were marched from the ghetto to the camp. On the next day, on the 14th of March, part B of the ghetto was liquidated, and the people from part B of the ghetto were sent to Auschwitz. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions or maybe comments, I think now will be the time to do that.
I wonder if you could explain the use of Hebrew at the entrance to the ghetto in Limanowskiego Street. How many other ghettos had such a huge Hebrew lettering at the entrance?
Pytanie było to, czy jesteś w stanie wyjaśnić, czy w innych getach też były napisy portugalskie? Czy były
Możesz na wszystko.
Pytanie było to, czy w innych getach też pojawiały się napisy w alfabecie hebrajskim? Czy to było typowe dla Krakowa?
Nie, z tego co wiem, to były napisy tylko w Jidysz.
As far as I know, actually it was in Yiddish only. Yiddish. The inscriptions were in Yiddish. The inscriptions.
It's okay, but in Hebrew letters.
Yes, but in Hebrew letters. Mm-hmm.
Hebrew letters.
The question is, why was it in Yiddish? Was there any other ghettos that had this explanation in Yiddish or Hebrew letters or Yiddish letters?
All of this was done mostly to make life difficult for all those who didn't know Hebrew or Yiddish, who didn't know the Hebrew script. So it was done on purpose. But it seems the question was whether there were similar inscriptions in other ghettos, and the speaker says she doesn't know. She's not able to state whether there were similar inscriptions in other ghettos. I wanted to ask, you said that only 12,000 people were moved into the ghetto initially when it was created, and then during the first actions 5,000 or 6,000, you said, every time were deported to Bełżec. And you said when the ghetto was being liquidated, there were some 15,000 people were deported to Bełżec. Why this discrepancy, this disproportion? Thank you very much for the question. I didn't want to make this lecture too long. The situation was that from July 1940 until the creation of the ghetto, Jewish inhabitants of Krakow mostly left to villages and cities just outside Krakow. I don't remember the date at the moment, but in 1941 a decree was issued that places like Wieliczka, Bochnia and others, all these towns, were to be Judenrein, free of Jews, and many of those people moved back into the Krakow ghetto. So initially there was just 12,000 Jews in the ghetto, but later when all these people had moved into Krakow, there was around 20,000 people, 20,000 Jews in the ghetto. Thank you very much.
Trzeba to przenieść. Jesteśmy połączeni z Cheryl, czy ty będziesz z nią rozmawiał tutaj? Ty będziesz się witać z Cheryl, czy kto się będzie z nią witać?
Nie, Cheryl po prostu
Dobra, czyli ja powinienem się z nią teraz przywitać.
wiesz co,
Bo wypada, żeby ktoś się z nią przywitał, jak się łączymy teraz, nie? I nie wiem, czy to masz być ty, Kuba, czy ja mam to zrobić, czy...
ja mogę ją przedstawić.
Co w końcu rzucamy? Ją czy prezentację?
To jest już właśnie.
Zakładam, że
To
prezentację.
co, może za minutę? Ale w sensie my ją rzucamy na...
Nie, mi się wydaje, że chyba prezentacja, no bo ona ma 11 prezentacji.
Bardzo
No
dobrze.
ale to ona
Znaczy, ja
udostępni,
jej wysłałem
nie?
maila, ale nie wiem, czy ona to zrobi.
Aha, no to jeżeli udostępni, no to
No to
spoko.
może się, może
A,
przywitajmy się
zobaczmy,
z
czy
nią,
ja-
nie? I
Czekaj, ja zapytam
Czekaj,
tylko,
to
czy...
przywitajmy się.
mamy słuchawki albo coś.
Nie, to poleci na ten, na
Ona teraz poleci na głównym, czy
No nie
nie?
wiem właśnie.
Czy jeszcze nie?
Głośność, wyłącz wyciszenie. No może będzie okej,
No
zobacz.
dobra, no to łączymy. Hi, Cheryl, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, good. How are you? We are just testing the sound.
Wyłączymy. Zapytaj ją o prezentację.
Will you be sharing your screen with your presentation? Okay, great.
Hi Cheryl, this is Kasia. I will introduce you and then you will have your presentation. We have the Zoom on the main screen, so everybody are seeing you. And if you want to share something, please do it like from your computer, so it will go through that transmission. Okay? Awesome.
Thank you.
And we...
Like one more minute, so everybody will gather after the break.
Okay. So... Yeah, so we still have 10 more minutes.
Okay. Do you want me to be finished still at 11:45?
Yes, yes. Okay, I will turn off my microphone and screen for a while.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to introduce Ms. Dr. Cheryl Ohayon. She's with us, connecting straight from Israel. She studied at Harvard Law School and also history at the State University University of New York. She's an experienced Holocaust educator at International School for Holocaust Studies at Yad Vashem, and she will speak about the women and the resistance. Cheryl, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Cheryl, so the floor is yours. If you. Okay.
Oh, is the introduction finished?
Yes, the break finished, so the floor is yours.
Okay, so, but Natasha said you were going to introduce me.
I just did.
She just did, but
Okay,
You haven't seen me, but we all see you.
So, hello everyone. It's very nice to be here with you virtually. I wish that I could have been with you physically, but there are all kinds of interesting health problems going on my end. We won't get into that. What I would like to do with you, though, is speak about a subject that's very, very near and dear to my heart, and that is the fierce females. What I like to call the fierce females, the resistance of women in Krakow. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get right into it. Okay. So why is this so near and dear to me? Because I think it gets short shrift. People don't talk about the women enough because by and large the underground fighting movements are seen as male territory. But the truth is that without the women who were part of the resistance, none of what happened in Krakow, Sigmund's operation, none of it could ever happen. And I'm sorry to quote by Daniel Rickroom, who I realized from Warsaw, but we feel a lot of very interesting things. And he said, the future historian will have to dedicate an appropriate page to the Jewish woman in the war. She will take up an important page in Jewish history for her courage and steadfastness. Now, we may not have been talking about the same type of people that I'm going to be talking about here, but in May of 1942, he was already very cognizant of the fact that women were playing an important part in Jewish life during the Holocaust in general. And I'm going to take a step back because we can't really understand women's role in armed resistance in Krakow, or in other events really, without some context. We need to know where we are in the war, we need to know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to screen you a very short video that's part of the series of videos that we have made in session. They stand proudly with fellow Germans in a shared future through education, morality, and spiritual awareness. Now, as one has in the dark hatred and Russian, they understand why the world has such movements to fight Germans. They are about to die fighting for their ideals.
It's always going to be the youth movements that are really going to play the key role, and that was so in Krakow, as it was in Warsaw, as it was really in a lot of other places. And why do we do that? Why was it youth movements? One of the things that we have to understand, and I'm just going to show you a series of just beautiful, beautiful pictures. These youth movements had started in the World War, but they did a very important thing for the young people in Poland. And I will refer you to the testimony of Cooper. She gave a testimony in which she specifically said, she was being asked to talk about how and what happened in the ghetto. And she specifically said, wait, but before I talk about that, I want to talk about the youth movements. Because they were so important. They were so important because they were the place where the young Jews came to get some kind of feeling of pride. There was, if you remember, that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland before the war. There were laws that started to be passed, and remarks that were made in the street, and all kinds of things like that. And so she said specifically in her testimony, this was where the young people came. This is where they got their pride. This is the people who didn't go to these movements had a much harder time standing up to the people who would beat them up or who would call them names. The youth movements, the Jewish youth movements were the ones who gave them their dignity. And the big thing in these youth movements were not just their meetings legally, and they met during the week, and they met on Shabbat. It wasn't just that, it was also that every single summer they would have a summer camp. This is a picture of a summer camp from the Kiva movement. This was one of the things that really kept them together, really cemented and pulled them together. And it's going to become instrumental also in resistance because these people grew up with each other. They grew up with each other, they knew that they could trust each other, and especially in Krakow, that's going to be very, very important. Because we heard from the previous speaker how small the ghetto was, and we'll see why that becomes so important. So these youth movements and the summer camps and this connection that was formed between the members of the youth movements are going to be very, very important. And these are just, I just love these pictures. But then, of course, once you get to World War II, and once the ghettos are created, these interpersonal relationships are going to become even more important. Because, as we just heard, there were deportations, June of 1942, October of 1942, and what happens is that many of these, really they're kids, many of these teenagers, they're in their teens, their 20s, they lose their families. They are completely unmoored. They are disconnected. They have no family, they have no mother, they have no father. everyone's gone. Everything that they had before was gone. And so these youth movements become like surrogates for this issue of family that's no longer there. And they stopped a lot of people from just throwing up their hands and giving into despair. I want to play you another short clip, and I hope that you can hear it. Somebody tell me if you can't. This is Israel who's actually from Lodz, but he is explaining to us how significant the youth movement was to him. And this is all very important in the context of resistance. Sorry. Let's try that again. years after the Samaria operation. And what you realize when you think about the words that Joel said, he's thinking about us. He's not thinking about himself. They were fighting for 3 lines in history. And the fact that we are having this conference today, that is the 3 lines in history that they were fighting for. So we're giving them their due by paying tribute to them 80 years later. This unbelievable, incredible story. Okay. Here are 4 women who represent a lot more women. These are only 4 of them. And they represent a lot of women whose pictures are I don't have or couldn't put on the screen. But I want to explain to you their importance, and I want to explain to you what their role was in creating this resistance. Why were they so important? Why did it have to be women? So you see from the left to right through Livingston, Gustav, Justina, Ella Schiffer, and Volodymyra. And we'll talk about all of them. Before we actually even talk about that, what we have to understand a little bit about is why was it so difficult to stage armed resistance in the ghettos? What's the big deal? I mean, okay, why was this such a big thing? So just really quickly, I mean, I'm sure you all understand this already, you all know it, it's kind of common sense, but we know that the ghettos were isolated from each other, which meant that because of the walls, news could not get from one ghetto to another. This was done very purposely by the Germans because they did not want one ghetto to understand what was happening in another ghetto, and when that ghetto's inhabitants were being deported. We know that there was mass starvation, death from hunger, and disease. Now, it's going to be very difficult to think about armed resistance when you're hungry all the time, when you're dying from hunger, from disease, from overcrowding, from all of this, you know, the ghettos, especially in Krakow, was so small, and people were just crowded in. This overcrowding and demoralization, where these ghettos have existed in some cases for 2 or 3 years, and these people are just constantly living under oppression. And of course, one of the big problems is going to be difficulty in spreading that message that, remember, came from Vilna, came from Poland, this whole fight, resist to your last breath. How is it going to get to these other places in general government? How is it going to get to all these places? And here are some just additional difficulties. There are no weapons. I mean, think about that for a second. The youth is not just thinking about themselves, they may also care for parents or children or other family members if they still exist. The danger of collective punishment for the young population, we're talking about that in a second, and denying the deaths that are facing it. Many people didn't want to believe that what was happening all around in the other ghettos was going to happen to them. There were difficulties that were unique to Krakow, and these difficulties were, first of all, the fact that the ghetto was tiny, and because the ghetto was so small, what happens is that there are fewer places to hide. What happens also is that everyone knows what's going on, so there were more people who could look around and see, oh, there's an underground organization, something's happening here. Who are these people? We're going to betray them to the Germans to get a reward. And there's a great likelihood also with the punishment, because whatever the resistance does, everyone can get a punishment. So all of these problems altogether mean that resistance is going to be very hard. And this is a quote from the Joseph Wolff, who wrote the introduction to these ideas in Arabic. And he says, our work is 100 times more difficult than the work of any other resistance group, because we have to deal not only our underground activity, but also, and even more urgently, our Jewish identities. So the first thing that the leaders had to do was deny even to themselves the impossibility of the task before them. In other words, they could not even allow themselves to think about how difficult it was going to be to mount armed resistance. What did they need in order to carry out this armed resistance? They needed to get information about the deportations from the other ghettos, and they needed a way to connect with the other ghettos and spread And so what they needed were safe houses to which these fighters could go if they were being pursued, if they were at risk of being found out, that type of thing. They needed instruction. They had no idea what none of these people had been fighters before. They were all educators. They needed money and they needed weapons. And so, and I hope you'll be able to hear this as well, this is where the women come into the picture. And I want to play you a little clip of her ability to get into the birth of her testimony at the Eiffel in 1961. Listen when she says, "our girls," because she's speaking about the women in the ghetto.
Definitely learned after the first deportations. We have heard others about the direction of the deportation trains. And then we came to a decision that we cannot go and be stronger than a sheep. But we cannot stand with broken arms of love as I never told children, brothers and sisters, I will take our brothers and not do anything about it. Because it's the years of toilets now, but that was very difficult at the time. The first thing we did, after we learned the aim of those deportations, were to send warnings to all Jews. The most who had any way or means by their area to leave the ghetto would go out to the ghetto, get in touch with other ghettos and the ghetto as well. We used to come to the ghettos and get in touch with the people we know, the ghettos raised.
I understand that there's a problem hearing. So hang on, let me stop to share for a second and let me optimize the sound. Let's see. And then we'll try it again. I apologize for the problem. Okay. Let's start where she was, and if it's still not good, someone will let me know.
Cheryl?
It is dangerous during the war to approach a stranger. But through those acquaintances, we sent word to everybody. We sent word where those deportation trains headed home.
Okay. I apologize. I understand there's a problem with the sound. Okay.
We have those videos, so we will play them again after Cheryl finished, all right? Cheryl, so since we have the presentation, we will play those two movies when you're done, all right? Because the sound is really, really terrible. So when you're done, we'll use a few minutes and play them from our computer.
Okay, that's great, but really you kind of have to hear this sequence. So if it doesn't work, I'll try and work around it. But thank you to the offer. It is great stuff. Okay, so you heard or you didn't hear, as the case may be, and I apologize, but what you did was talk about our girls. Our girls were the ones who gave notice to other people as they were going back and forth. They sent word to all the other ghettos. Who is she talking about? Our girls. When she talks about our girls, she's talking about these women who were what we call, in English, we call them couriers. In Hebrew, we use the word shaliot because Hesed in Hebrew is really together, connection. And they were really lifelong. They were the connection for news, for information, for supplies, for resources, and also for personal inspiration. So the first three girls that I showed you before were couriers. Rivka and Gusta and Ella were all couriers. This is an example of the type of false documents that these women had to use. Because really all they had to rely was their looks, their coolness under pressure, because they were very cool under pressure. And we'll talk about that more, and these big documents that they may have had. So this is Vladimir, whose name was really fighting with them. And you can see this is her part from Warsaw. Can't find this many in Krakow, so I don't have one from there. But this is Emmanuel Bloom again. I'll read it very quickly to you. These heroic girls hike and from the their theme that involves them and a great writer only. They travel back and forth to the cities and towns of Poland. They are in Norway every day. They rely entirely on their Aryan faces and on the peasant kerchiefs that cover their heads. Without a murmur, without a moment's hesitation, they accept and carry out the most dangerous missions. Is someone needed to smuggle contraband, such as illegal publications, goods, money? The girls volunteer as though it were the most natural thing in the world. They undertake the mission. Nothing stands in their way. Nothing deters them. How many times have they looked death in the eyes? How many times have they been arrested and searched? So he's talking about these women. Again, the year 1942, and he already understands how important these women were to the underground movement, to to smuggling in general. And we're going to discuss the couriers in Krakow. So again, these are a couple of them. Gustav or Justina on the left, and Miriam or Nathan on the right, and of course there were many others. These girls, what really characterized them was the fact that they were all active in youth movements, sometimes leaders of youth groups. They were very ideologically committed, so this was burning in them. They were Zionists, they were burning Zionists. For many of them, the group was a surrogate family, and they were very intense and very passionate about the youth movements they belonged to. If you look at this photo carefully, you can see Yasha Shorchak right in the middle of the photo towards the bottom. And so this is the seminar of the Yiddish in Warsaw in 1938. And this is what you see that it has to say about it. Those driven by work and usually exhausted by the end of the day, the fighters tended home in the evening with satisfaction. Everyone had been accomplished, and when anyone stepped across the threshold, it was the heart overflowing with happiness. They all felt a tremendous need to love and be loved, a longing for a communal life permeating with closeness. Time after time, their mutual devotion would be renewed with even greater fervor. So this is what she's expressing, this incredible connection and passion and intensity these people had. Another thing about the couriers was that usually they had Aryan looks. They spoke a little language without a Jewish accent, and their mannerisms and gestures were also a little. Why is that so important? And why women? Why would women be more prone to have this than men would be? Remember that most women, most Jewish women, were girls around the world, educated in secular Polish schools, because when education became mandatory in Poland, that was just the cheapest way of doing it. And families, especially families who weren't really that convinced that girls needed to be educated at all, they weren't going to spend the money to send them possibly to a private school or to the gymnasium or gymnasia. Many of them were educated in secular Polish schools. And so they learned Polish, they learned to speak Polish fluently and without an accent. Remember that Jewish boys were still being educated in theaters. And in theater, you learn how to rhythmic sing-song in Yiddish, and you learn how to argue, and you learn all of this stuff. You never lose that accent. And so it was much easier for women to do this than it was for men. Hang on. Getting into this, I should be taking down my volume. Can I do that? Okay. So this is one quote about Hilla, you just saw in the signature. And you see this as Hilla became the movement's most important liaison. She was able to make her way through the never-ending assignments by using her articulateness and her voluptuous beauty with the confidence of a woman supremely aware of the trumps. None of the casual acquaintances she met in travels, suspected that Helen was among the weapons, that she had 2 brown eggs hanging under her loose sports coat, and 3 hand weapons, and a few clips of cartridges in her bag. So, if you go back to that picture, you see how these women, many of them dyed their hair. Holocaust, in her own memoirs, Farewell to 19, she discusses the fact that the first time she dyed her hair, she dyed it blonde, it came out red, and she had to find this special solution that was blue, and it actually turned her hair very, very blonde, and after that, she knew how to do it every mission that she went on. She changed her clothes, she adopted a style, she got the newest fashion bag, and she was able to pull it off. And this was a big deal. Most of these girls, as Rivka calls them, they were in their late teens and early 20s, and here you can see their very, very young faces. Cheshire Driver, we see on the bottom, was actually only 15 when she became a courier, when they became a woman. So they were very young. And I think that also makes sense to us, because the youth kind of have this feeling, and this is how Justina describes it. She says, the older folks laugh about his spirit, needed to listen to the enemy. Why should that was a surprise? Anyone who does not live through 3 years of degradation, humiliation, and hating, who does not clung desperately to a life hanging by a thread in the midst of the turbulent storm, will not be able to understand the despair of these people, who is different and young. They bludgeoned and refused to accept their fate passively. Their powerful desire to live drove them to active resistance, which was not without its ironies, since it was this irresistible lust for life that drove them to engage in overwhelmingly superior enemy, thereby exposing themselves to certain death. Paradoxically, the perennial strength of the young was its greatest weakness, pushing them to their deaths. So, and you have to say that they had chutzpah. Chutzpah is, good Jewish nerves of steel, and they were very cool under pressure. Their looks inspired them to be chivalrous. Many of the couriers were roses that they used to use. They would carry suitcases full of guns or contraband or underground newspapers. They would make friends with Germans on the train, and they would actually ask these Germans to carry their suitcases with them. More than one of the couriers did this. So, that kind of gives you an inkling into how they used their looks and their coolness. And here's to see them again about Hella. One beautiful day, Hella returned from Warsaw. She entered the border smiling, looking flushed and animated, dressed nicely, and holding a proud case in her hand. She walked with a firm step, acknowledging the admiring passers-by. It seemed the only thing she cared about was being admired. Anyone who observed the way she flirted shamelessly on the train, or who saw her crossing the station, flashing them from a pocket smile, would have assumed she was on her way to visit her fiancé, or to go on vacation. They would have been certain that she had no concern in life other than to enhance their worldly pleasures. So these women had to be actresses. They really had to be actresses. But of course, probably the biggest reason why women became couriers was because they had a very distinct physical advantage over Jewish men, which is that they were not circumcised. Circumcision, a ceremony that's performed at 8 days old, leaves an external physical scar, and women did not have to be concerned that the Nazis, if they suspected them of being Jewish, that they would tell them to drop their pants. And that was really a big worry with men. They also, aside from this issue of circumcision, women were brought up to be attuned to verbal cues and non-verbal cues as well. So if somebody is looking at you for just a moment too long, you process that, you understand what you need to do. You don't look down, because if you look down, that's a dead giveaway. You have to play the part. And women were very good at that. What did these couriers do? This is kind of a quick sketch of all of the things that they did, and really there were even more things than this. But what I really want to talk about is probably the most important thing that these women did, and that was detaining weapons and dynamite and guns. Although in Krakow, selling the forged documents also a very big deal. That was one of the ways that the Kiva assistance movement made money to finance these activities. Shinzo Driver would make forged documents, ID cards, cards to enable people to enter into the ghetto, and the resistance movement sold it, but somebody had to take those cards in a basket under the potatoes and under the vegetables and come with these cards to the city to sell them. So that was definitely one of the important things. But you can see also this issue of obtaining and distributing weapons and dynamite guns. This is also from Joseph Gold. When the Jewish fighting force, that should be force, was formed in Krakow, Lucifer became the soul of the conspiratorial undertaking. And now one of the fighting successfully undertaken could have been accomplished without her inspiration and work. What did she do? And I can tell you, this whole issue of the weapons and the dynamite, she actually smuggled people in and out of the ghetto. She had a network of safe houses that she found. She kept in touch with the Cuban women in other cities, just like the police did, just like but Hella's real mission was, she was really the first one to bring weapons, the first one to bring weapons on Krakow ghetto. Now, one of the things that we have to understand is, and think about this also, these people 8 years ago who are wanting to write 3 lines of history, they have nothing to write those lines with. They have no weapons. The people, they first of all, again, they were teachers. They were never fighters. They were dreamers. They were never fighters. They had to become fighters. But even if once they took the plunge to become fighters, they had nothing to fight with. They were practicing fighting, using sticks. Boom, 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 bang, bang, bang. They had no weapons at all. So when the first weapons came in, they were brought in by Ella. That was a big deal. She taped the pistols to her body under her clothing, and she brought the explosive bullets in her bag, packed some lingerie around it, some dirty laundry, and that's how she came into the ghetto. She was so confident and such a good actress that no one stopped her. And to see the rights, no one had ever been greeted with the outpouring affection that was showered on her. The weapons she brought marked the start of a new era. It is impossible to describe the ecstasy inspired by those weapons. It was truly a miracle. Now, it's very easy to talk about being a career, all of the things that they did, all of these incredible things, but we also have to remember how difficult it was, a life like this. And this is from Black Lady's memoirs. She says the common denominator of people like Hungarian side was fear. Fear of the Germans, fear of the Poles, fear of the blackmailers, fear of losing the Republicans' hideout, fear of being left penniless. How could one hide when you look for melancholy, not haunted with fear? Your eyes give you away on the child. Make them live in your area. Don't attract so much attention then, because the idea was that Jews had these very sad eyes. But our eyes are constantly watching, searching the shadows ahead, glancing quickly behind, seeing our own misfortune, seeing even worse to come. Haunted by fear of betrayal, our eyes betray us, and this knowledge only increased our fear. It's going to be very hard for these girls to live on the Aryan side of cities, to live outside the ghettos, because they need an apartment, they need to convince their landlords that they're Christian, and sometimes that meant having Christmas parties, inviting people over to their apartment. It would have been questionable if these women didn't have friends, didn't have social lives. Their landlords might have started guessing, what's the story here? So there were a lot of different things that they needed to do in order to establish that they were Christians and in order to keep up this whole masquerade. And this, I'm going to read you this very long poem by Skinner because I think it really describes so well how difficult it was to perform this work, how difficult it was in terms of stealing. And she says, but how do you manage to sneak out of a barbed wire surrounded with closely guarded by police? How do you take your first step into the outside world? They will see the arm hand or see it and you can be certain that a bullet to your hand will follow. Should you remove the arm hand? As soon as someone notices that white symbol sliding down your sleeve, he will betray you and deliver you into the hands of the police. And then perhaps you should try to slip into the blackness and darkness doorway, and there undertake to remove the ornament of your harm. No matter how dark that door, there will always be someone who notices that you stepped into as a Jew and stepped out as if you were a human being. Why as if you were a human being? Because to take off the ornament successfully, you first have to regain your sense of human dignity. Without that, you are nothing more than a Jew without an armpit. You would reveal your Jewishness in thousands of small ways. Every anxiety-filled move, every step taken in the back, punched over from the old slavery, every glance that bespoke the terror of something animal, the entire form, the face, on which the yellow left his indelible mark. You were nothing more than a Jew, not only because of the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, the shape of your nose, and any telltale signs of race. You were simply and unmistakably a Jew because of your lack of self-assurance, your way of expressing yourself, your behavior, and God knows what else. You were simply and conspicuously a Jew because everybody outside the other trained to detect your Jewishness. All those people eager to do you harm, who couldn't find the thought that you might initiate death. So we have to understand from what you see that's writing, from what that's writing, how difficult it was. You can't just take off your argument, that doesn't work. You have to pretend to be non-Jews, you have to deal with the fear and the loneliness, you have to wear the mask all the time and disguise the sadness. This is a film clip, I will not even attempt to play it, even though it's a great little clip. It comes from a movie called Resistance, or Uprising rather. And it basically shows one of the couriers who smuggled herself out of the ghetto, and then she's met by a man who is working with her in the underground, who tells her that she needs to learn how to laugh. Now, I happened to be online yesterday watching the recording of a conference that was held a few weeks ago by the Village Jewish Museum, with Mike Fairmount about 80 years to action right art. And Mike Fairmount, scholar and historian, was saying that he knew Vlad Amin, which is appeared in many of his pictures, and that what she told him was that when someone was looking at her, the first thing that she didn't cower, because that physical expression of uncertainty gives you a way of being. The first thing that she would do was throw out her arms to the side and laugh. A big laugh. Because that expressed the fact that you were confident of yourself, that you had nothing to fear. And it threw off all of these people who were waiting and looking for Jewish girls on the Aryan side. So this is how people respond who actually gets to Krakow the day of the secondary operation, who was also a courier from Warsaw, and she says, you had to laugh when you wanted to cry. And I think we will skip a little bit of this because I'm coming to the end. I have to say that one of the most difficult issues carrying out resistance was just making the decision to do it. And this is, you see, what she writes. Will anyone ever be able to comprehend how this group of idealistic dreamers took up arms and inspired being deprived of the right to live as human beings and as Jews, denying even the right to eat? They wanted to die with dignity, to go down fighting, not to die a trivial death. And this was a big issue for the Hebrews, because again, they were educators, they were leaders, they were not fighters, and they were afraid of this responsibility of dragging the people in their movements into this fight of doom and accepting death. It was a big question because this decision to fight could have exposed everyone to punishment, to all kinds of, to all kinds of moves against the younger population. And now I get to the fourth woman we saw on that first screen that I showed you, Lilura. And she, according to she was very much responsible for making this decision. Lola was actually Rivka Cooper's cousin. And she was a real firebrand. She was a revolutionary in the essence of the word. The first youth movement that she belonged to was Hashem Hatzarim, the Young Lord. But she was actually thrown out because of her communist ideas. She was a real communist, a real firebrand. She encouraged strikes. Apparently she was arrested with 11 or 12 other women. And she stood up in court, and when no one else actually was allowed to speak, she gave this hour-and-a-half lecture to the court about how amazing Poland is and what a wonderful country it is. And after she established all of this, she got to the fact that people have to be equal, people have to be treated equally. She was the only one allowed to speak at the trial, and apparently, although she was still sentenced to something like 15 years in prison, the prosecutor came afterwards and gave her 3 roses. So that shows you something about this fiery personality that she had, and how she really wanted to make a difference. She really believed in equality. She really believed that, and especially once the rumors about the deportation started happening, she believed that fighting was the only way out of the situation, and no one else actually was told that she wrote where you'll understand it more. So again, this is from Justina's social rights. The leadership was in a difficult situation when they decided in August 1942 to engage in armed struggle. They had known that they weren't prepared for the task. They had all been leaders of activist people organizations for many years. They never acted like officers, and were not eager to lead their young followers with the purpose. Their need for someone with military experience eventually led them to hook up with the Workers' Party. Yes, I should mention the fact that Lola she was the connection to the Krakow. And Justina says the person most responsible for the decision to join forces with the Krakow was undoubtedly Eva's cousin Lydia, Justina Rubin, influenced by powerful personality and unselfish dedication. Lola became less distrustful of communist ideology and decided to establish a connection with the Workers' Party. So now we really get to the heart of the operation itself, and I won't go into the operation really, except to show you these faces of these amazing human beings who carried it out, who decided that it was time, who were fighting for 3 lines of history. So you have Lola, who is the connection with the Iskra, which was the movement led by Tish Fowler. Also on the very left side of the scale. And these are all the faces of these youth movement leaders who put this Ignatian operation together. This is one of the poems that Lola wrote when she was later in prison. She was in prison together with Gustav. And she writes, instead of promise, I knew that machine guns are better than the strongest words, and righteous soldiers better than trustworthy lines of poetry. I knew that a rhyme written even in the most burning pain cannot compare to the thunderous drum of fighters going to battle. And this too I shall know. The red flag flying with stormy wind is more precious than anything sung. But how can I help it if I allow the words gathered in pain to burst out in song before my heart grows? Oh, poems, you are like arms that yearn in veins, so let my tortured cry be to battle, to battle. This was her way of dealing with the situation of the Jews in Krakow. It had to be by fighting, and that's where she came out, and that was her connection to Akiva, and that was one of the things that really spurred them to move forward, to get the guns. She was the connection with the PR, and then Holocaust brought those 5 first guns into the ghetto. So now the real question becomes, why were these women doing this? They could have been killed. What they were doing was very dangerous. Why? Why? And these are the words of Anna, who was one of the the second in command in the fires in Warsaw. And he says this: girls were valuable, and their sacrifice was infinite. Without them, it would definitely have been impossible to maintain the movement throughout the German occupation zone. All of them, and every individual, according to her ability, risked their life, and demonstrated unimaginable loyalty. I asked myself, where they drew their strength? What sustained them? So I want to give you a couple of answers. This is one of those last issues of fighting the underground newspaper that was published by Schindler together with Bustina. And in this case, it's 1943, it was being published after they broke out of prison. It was being published in Latvia and distributed secretly. And you can see the words here. Every action on our part paves the way for freedom of our people. Though we will not merit to see the establishment of an independent movement, we will at least fulfill our historical role to lift our lost nation to glory, to remove the stigma of slavery, and to place it in the ranks of the free nations. But I want to leave you, and this is, I won't even attempt this, we can later if you want, not necessary, but I want to leave you with Justina's words, because these are the words that were on the poster for the conference, and I think they explain a lot of what went on here, and a lot of why these women worked so hard and endangered their lives to do what they did. She said, history will never forgive us for not having thought about this. What normal thinking person would suffer all this in silence? Future generations will want to know what overwhelming motive could have restrained us from acting heroically. If we don't act now, history will condemn us forever. Whatever we do, we're doomed. But we can still save our souls. The least we can do now is leave a legacy of human dignity that will be honored by someone someday. And I will close just by saying that I'm very happy that we are here together honoring this legacy. Thank you very much.
Cheryl, thank you for this inspiring and very informative lecture. We're also very happy that you found time to be with us today. Right now we will just quickly put those two videos on from our computer, and then please stay with us for the questions, okay? So we just played videos from our computer for our audience, so the sound will be better.
Great.
When the German army invaded the Soviet Union and the Nazis began to systematically murder the Jews, youth movement couriers risked their lives to reach the isolated ghettos with this information. But most Jews did not believe the rumors. It was difficult to imagine such brutality. Yet, the leader of one of the youth groups in Vilna, Abba Koven, instinctively understood that Nazis intended to ruthlessly murder all the Jews of Europe. We call on the youth to take responsibility. Jewish youth, do not trust those who are trying to deceive you. In front of our very eyes, they tore our parents, our brothers, our sisters from us. Hitler is planning to annihilate all the Jews of Europe. Let us not go like sheep to the slaughter. The only response to the enemy is resistance. Brothers, it is better to die as free fighters than to live at the mercy of murderers. Resist to our last breath.
Why do corporations systematically youth? The young men and women in youth movements were teenagers. Like all teenagers, they believed they could change the world. Before the war, they saw themselves as educators and leaders taking responsibility for the future. In the ghettos, this idealism continued. They organized meetings, keeping up morale despite the grim reality of ghetto life. They assisted the community by caring for the children and creating soup kitchens. They also organized illegal activities, such as educational seminars and, importantly, underground newspapers. They believed in mankind. They still believed they could fight the violence and shape the future through education, morality, and spiritual weapons. Now, faced with mass murder in the future and vision, they understood that they would need more than spiritual weapons to fight the Germans. They were ready to die fighting for their ideals.
Carpenter's announcement reached the Warsaw Ghetto, hundreds of miles to the east. Warsaw was the largest ghetto in Europe. At its height, over 450,000 Jews were trapped inside, desperately struggling to survive. Youth movements there hesitated at first, but as reports of extermination filtered in, they began to realize that it was only a matter of time before mass murder reached Warsaw.
Regularly learned after the first deportations. We heard rumors about the direction of those deportation trains. And then we came to the decision that we cannot go and be slaughtered like sheep. We cannot stand with folded arms and look on as our parents or children, brothers and sisters were taken away from us and not do anything about it. Of course, it is easy to relate now, but it was very difficult at the time. The first thing we did, after we learned the aim of those deportations, were to send warnings to all Jews. Our girls who had any way or means to find an area look to leave the ghetto would go out to the ghetto, get in touch with other ghettos, and then as well, they used to come to the ghettos and get in touch with the people we know. The ghetto was great. It was dangerous during the war to approach a stranger, but through those acquaintances, we sent word to everybody. We sent word where those deportation trains headed for.
Okay, do we have any questions from our room, from our audience? Anybody would like to ask Dr. O'Hanlon? Okay, so I will just take this opportunity, Cheryl, to ask you, what you found the most difficult in researching through those stories? I wanted to ask you, what was the most difficult and most inspiring when you search for those stories, when you dig in the stories of those women?
I think the most difficult thing is the fact that only the women who survived usually wrote their stories, committed them to writing, to paper. And there are so many stories that are out there that we'll never know because they died together with the women who were killed. Most of these couriers, most of these women did not live to tell their stories. Guza is a huge exception to the rule because we're very lucky that she decided to write her memoirs and the memoirs of her movement while she was in prison. So we have that even though she did not survive. We do have some testimonies, we do have, and there is a lot more research that has been done lately on the couriers. But that's the most difficult thing is that many of these stories we will never know, we'll just never know. And I think the inspiration comes from the fact that they were so young, they were so ideologically motivated, they were so unbelievably caught up in this, against all odds, in this willingness to fight against the Germans, even though it was so clear, and that's actually, if you do want to lay another testimony, the very last testimony of my presentation is with the Fuhrer again. No, sorry, it's Sylvia. And she was asked by the counselor at the Atkinson trial, she was asked, what made you fight? Because you must have known that you were not going to ever be able to win against the Germans. And she says that was not why they were fighting. They were fighting for human dignity, basically. They were fighting to leave this message. They were fighting because they knew that ultimately they would have to prevail because the Nazis would have to be stopped by people of good conscience. So yeah, the most inspirational thing is their age and the fact that they were so committed to this struggle, even though they knew. Like Justine says, it was an irony because they knew that in fighting against the Germans they would probably cause their own deaths, but they still had to do it. They had to fight back. They had to leave this legacy, which I think is unbelievable.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It was great to have you with us today. And now we will take a 5 minutes break just to reload the presentation, and we will start another lecture. Thank you so much. Take care and all the best.
You too.
Proszę Państwa, 5 minut dosłownie, żebyśmy tylko załadowali prezentację dr Gawron i zaczynamy kolejny wykład. Także...
Mam na pendrive już odstawię stronę od komputera. Tak. Żeby coś się nie otworzyło przypadkiem, jakaś poczta prywatna. Okej.
Nie. To jest antywirusz po prostu.
Okej, nie.
Te piloty slajdów będziemy potrzebne, czy nie?
Proszę?
Pilot do slajdów będziemy potrzebne?
Pilot do slajdów? Nie, ja będę tutaj... Tylko zastanawiam się, czy troszkę się przesunąć, żeby było widać.
No można się troszkę przesunąć, chociaż tak mało pani głowę ucina.
Pani chce usunąć?
Nie.
Bo tak pani kliknęła.
Nie, coś tutaj, a nie, pokazuję tutaj.
Trzeba niestety przeklikać.
Okay.
Zamknąć.
I tutaj zamknę.
No już powinno być świetny pokaz slajdu.
Dobra. Okej.
Nie ma jak już działało, to złości.
Działa, dobra.
Prezentacja działa.
Dobrze.
To co? Muszę trochę stół?
Tak. Adam będzie mnie widział.
Zobaczy Pani, jak się Pani widzi.
Dobra, to ja nie będę zasłaniać wtedy slajdów. Okej, dobrze, to o to chodziło. Dobra. Jest moje. Nie, mogę jeszcze poczekać.
Teoretycznie to minęło 12:50 mija. Teoretycznie 12:50 mija.
Okej, ja wiesz co, tak postaram się 35-40 minut.
Się opóźni.
Nie, bo ja wiesz, nie chciałam za długo mieć, tak liczyłam na to, że będzie 20-25 minut. Oczywiście mogę mówić tutaj, nie ma problemu, bo mam
Znaczy, jak trochę przyczepnie nic się nie stanie, bo ja chyba kończę i po niej jest już tylko godzinna przerwa przed wycieczką.
No, spokojnie. Ja postaram się skończyć nie później niż za 15. Postaram się 5 minut wcześniej, żeby była jakaś dyskusja. Trzymam zegarek przed sobą.
Przecież nic się nie stanie.
I od razu przepraszam, że będę musiała do swojej prezentacji wyjść, bo mam spotkanie na uniwersytecie, więc przepraszam, że wyjdę. Aż 2 mikrofony?
Żeby były widać.
Dobra.
Proszę Państwa, będziemy powoli zaczynać. Ladies and gentlemen, we will slowly start our next lecture. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Edyta Gawron, Assistant Professor at Institute of Jewish Studies at Jagiellonian University, Chairwoman at Academic Advisory Board of European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, and also President of our board at Galicia Jewish Museum. Dr. Gawron specializes in contemporary history of Jews in Poland, history of the Holocaust, and history of the Jewish diaspora in 20th century. The floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Kasia, for the introduction. I will speak in. I'll be talking about the commemoration, and I hope my English will be clear enough and understandable for the audience in the room, but also online. As I understood, that there will be a translation to Polish provided. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to join the lectures today, but also to give the opportunity to talk about the commemoration of the ghetto, of the Holocaust in general in Krakow, in the public spaces. And I would like to start my presentation by mentioning one person in the room, who is the living witness of the ghetto, the survivor from the ghetto, Bernard Hoffen, who is with us, and it's an enormous pleasure and honor to have you, Bernard, with us today. When thinking about the commemoration process, I've been looking through all the sources and photographs and documentation about the ghetto in Krakow, about some documentation on mass extermination of Krakowian Jews. And of course, the ghetto is just one very tragic chapter of the history of the extermination of Krakowian Jews that started almost immediately during the first days of the Second World War, and it lasted till almost the last days of this war. Immediately after the Second World War, the process of documenting and commemorating started. The process was initiated by the survivors of the ghetto and the survivors of the Holocaust themselves, especially the group that joined immediately the Jewish Historical Commission, the regional branch that was accompanying, or it was associated with the Jewish committee in Krakow, located in Długa number 38. This Jewish Historical Commission was really crucial in preserving and publishing and storing the first sources, the first documents on the Holocaust in Krakow and the region. And the group of people that was involved was essential to the publishing of the books, the first books on the Holocaust in Krakow, including the first official and very publicly present anniversary of the ghetto liquidation in Krakow in 1946, which is documented with the series of articles published here. But also we've heard about the Gusta's diary. It was also published by this Jewish Historical Commission immediately after the Second World War in Polish. And the members of the commission were crucial in preparing the trial that was organized in Krakow, the trial of Amon Get, the commandant of Płaszów. The commission itself was really one of the most active Jewish historical commissions in Poland. And besides the publications already mentioned, they also were involved in publishing other works on Belzec's camp, on the poetry from the Holocaust time, but also the series of documents related to the Second World War and the Holocaust in general. I do not have the time to list all the books, but whoever is interested, I do recommend the listings that are included in every book published by the Commission. You can see the one on the right-hand side here. But these were the books. Of course, the books were published to document the history, but also with the understanding that the books can be taken away, that the books can be taken with the survivors to any place. And we have these examples all around Europe that the survivors of the Holocaust didn't know what would be their future. So instead of building the memorials, sometimes they were publishing the books as the reading memorials to the past. Nevertheless, in Krakow, there were also the first attempts to commemorate the past in a more physical form with the plaques, with the memorial boards located on the site of the Holocaust itself. And one of the first examples of public commemoration was putting the plaque in still Plac Zgody on the anniversary of ghetto liquidation in 1948. The plaque was put on the wall of one of the buildings, on the front wall of one of the buildings in Zgody Square, number 6, commemorating the not just the victims of the Holocaust, but also those who were fighting for dignity, the members of Jewish fighting organizations. The plaque remains there in the changed form, but with the dating from 1948 there. It's worth to mention that in the same year, 1948, the name of the square was changed from Zgody Square to Ghetto Heroes Square, which is really meaningful in 1948 to have this change. And I think this was one of the last such significant changes in public places in Krakow before the political changes late in 1948 and 1949, which liquidated the autonomy of religious life, Jewish religious life, Jewish political life in Krakow, and in fact led to the diminishing of the variety of Jewish activities in Krakow. There was not enough, I would say, probably energy or time to commemorate all the places related to the Jewish fighting organizations, and till today there are places that are not visibly commemorated with the plaque, but they are remembered. So this is also important to emphasize that there are some places that are with physical commemoration, with physical memorial plaque, and there are places that are really remembered by the local people, by the guides, by the Jewish community, and on different occasions they are visited, like the one in Józefinska Street. An interesting story that was already mentioned here today was related to commemorating another site related to the Jewish fighting organization, commemorated already in early 1950s with the plaque put on the site of Tsiganeria action, the action on Tsiganeria Cafe and Restaurant, and this plaque is I think the best and the worst example of forgetting the past, or distortion of the past, or denial of the past. Because the first plaque put on the building where Tsiganeria Cafe was didn't mention Jewish fighters, didn't mention anyone from Jewish community involved in preparing the action. Instead, it glorified the fighters from Gwardia Ludowa, People's Guard, communist underground organization. This was not a surprising act of commemoration at that time. We have to remember that this was the Stalinist period, and a lot of examples of Jewish past were, many examples of the Jewish history were either distorted, or changed, or simply omitted in public commemoration. But in this case, it's really like taking over the bravery of Jewish fighters and replacing it with the alleged bravery of communist underground organization. So the plaque you see on the top pictures are these are the photos of the first plaque, which was much later replaced by the corrected plaque, which was still not 100% correct, but at least the second plaque in the same location mentioned a Jewish fighting organization. So we are having this switch from the absence of Jewish fighters to the co-presence of Jewish fighters, still with the wrong date and still with the wrong facts. We hope that this year, 2022, will mark another change, this time to the right facts, to the proper history, and to the proper acknowledgement of the Jewish fighters in Krakow. And as I've learned, we have all the permissions from the authorities, including the Polish Institute of National Remembrance, to change the wording of the plaque and include the correct date of the action. In this theme of commemorating Jewish fighters, I would like to also mention the plaque that it's maybe not so well known, not so very well visible, but nevertheless very important for commemoration of the Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. It's the plaque that is located on the building owned by the Jewish congregation in Krakow, not used by the Jewish congregation right now, but nevertheless it's associated with the Jewish community. And in Skawinska number 2 we have the plaque commemorating the Tsiganeria action. The location of this plaque might be surprising to some people, but there is a historical evidence and historical facts that sort of led to this location, which is Skawinska Street was the location of one of the centers of Jewish fighters, one of their cells during the Holocaust, and they were also coming back to one of the cells, and they were captured, at least some of them, over there. So we're talking about the early decades after the Holocaust, when the memory of what happened during the Second World War was still very fresh among the survivors themselves, among the witnesses. And the Jewish congregation in Krakow, Jewish community in general, was trying to commemorate the past in the any form available. Of course, it was difficult with the time to have any public commemoration with the right wording in the streets of Krakow. But there were some locations that had some autonomy, like Jewish cemetery. And that's why another stage of commemorating the Holocaust happened in Jewish cemetery in Miodowa 55, Miodowa Street number 55. And here we see the example of the memorial to the victims of the Holocaust, the memorial that was constructed of various memorial plaques, but also the fragments of the tombstones that were collected all around Krakow and the region. And this is what I would call the progressive memorial, because the plaques were added with the time. And the last edition is the plaque you can see on the top, 2022. The plaque of the Ores family was changed, and also some name was added. So it's the memorial that is changing with the time, that includes various families coming originally from Krakow, but also it has this general aspect of commemoration of those who perished during the Holocaust, who were originally from Krakow or the region. And here I have to add one more comment. We talk about the Krakow's Jewish community, we talk about Krakow's Jews, but the difference between Krakow and Krakow region really was changing over the post-Holocaust years. There were not so many communities, Jewish communities, surviving after the Second World War. So the Jews who were originally from the nearby towns would usually belong to the congregation in Krakow. They would be more connected with the Krakow, the city, than their own hometown. So the major sites of commemoration were located in Krakow, although they were devoted to the Jews from the region. The commemoration of the ghetto, the Holocaust in general, had different forms, and I started with the books. And when we talk about 1950s, because this memorial was established in the late 1950s, I also have to mention, just symbolically, some aspects of commemoration abroad. There are Krakowian Jews who left Poland either just before the Second World War, during the war, or after the Holocaust, who were involved in commemorating the Holocaust in Israel, in the United States, in Australia, and various initiatives were present in this community throughout the post-Holocaust decades. Getting back to Krakow, of course, the post-Holocaust communist period was a difficult time for the Jewish authors to publish. And within the period of 1950s, 1960s, especially before 1968, it was more likely to have publications on the Holocaust by non-Jewish authors. There was a certain level of censorship for Jewish authors, publishers in this time. Therefore, a witness's account, such as Pankiewicz's account, was really precious at that time. His testimony of Krakow ghetto was first published in the late 1940s, and then the publication was repeated in various forms, and he himself was a living witness of what happened. He stayed in Krakow, he talked about what he saw, what he experienced throughout these years. The next publication that became kind of iconic testimony and the scholarly work on the ghetto of Krakow. It's Alexander Bieberstein's book, which was published later. Nevertheless, together with Pankiewicz's book, served as the encyclopedia of a Krakow ghetto, and it was to some extent also the tribute to all Krakow's Jews who perished. Krakow was also, throughout this post-Holocaust period, the place which on the map of Poland was quite unique. Unique because the remnants of the ghetto survived. Quite extensive remnants of the ghettos. The whole district that used to be the ghetto was almost untouched for the post-Holocaust decades. With the exception of some significant roadworks around Plac Bohaterów Getta, the Ghetto Heroes Square. But the whole infrastructure, urban infrastructure, is to some extent preserved till today. There are also two fragments of the ghetto walls that are preserved till today, and they were the silent witnesses of what happened there and sort of natural historical memorials of the ghetto, of the Holocaust, and they serve like once today. We have the fragment of the ghetto wall in Lwowska Street, and then on the side of Limanowskiego Street behind one of the schools there. So we have these fragments seen here and here being to some extent the examples of memorials, commemoration spaces, and the city's efforts, the community efforts to preserve them is the sign, for me at least, the sign of memory, of the living memory of the ghetto, of not allowing these sites to be destroyed. And I'm very happy that the city right now is investing in preserving the ghetto walls, in supporting the construction of it. Among the places that remained in the location of the ghetto, there was the building at the location of the pharmacy under the Eagle. And of course, because of the communist period, because of all the political changes, but also other changes that happened there, Pankiewicz couldn't stay too long in the pharmacy. He was the pharmacy was nationalized, and he was stripped of his position as the owner and the manager. And the pharmacy became a bar, a restaurant, a canteen, however you name it, and served as such for the local inhabitants for a long period of the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s. Of course, it was kind of ironic to see such a place in such important location, but we can guess that this was the action taken on purpose by the local communist authorities. Nevertheless, in 1980s, some changes started, and I think it was both the increasing consciousness of the importance of the place. It was also the fact that Tadeusz Pankiewicz was more and more widely known, not just in Poland but internationally. Here we see Tadeusz Pankiewicz being interviewed by Claude Lanzmann. So his appearance in the documentary was really important, but also the fact that he served all the time as the witness was crucial to establishing the very first exhibition. We couldn't call it the museum, but really it was the exhibition, the memorial hall called Museum of National Memory or National Remembrance, and Pankiewicz himself was present at the opening. So I think this was one of the very first acts that led to the proper to the proper commemoration of the pharmacy under the eagle, and to the later changes under the auspices of the Historical Museum of the City of Krakow, today the Museum of Krakow. Pankiewicz himself was also recognized as the righteous among the nations, which led to another set of testimonies, and here we see a meaningful photo which is mistakenly presented in many publications as offering the title and the diploma to Tadeusz Pankiewicz. In fact, I talked to the person who is present in this picture and to the photographer, and it was the photo taken by Chuck Fishman with Josef Herzl just holding the diploma to display it for the photo. It was not presenting the diploma the first time to Tadeusz Pankiewicz, so it's the wrong credits given to this photo by the museum. Nevertheless, this photograph is really symbolic, because we are having here Tadeusz Pankiewicz and the son of the survivors from Krakow region, 1980s, a crucial time. Talking about the righteous among the nations, I also have to mention the fact that even during the communist period, to some extent, they tried to show the impact of non-Jewish Poles on saving Jews. It was not till later that local efforts by the righteous among the nations were commemorated, and one of the examples, unfortunately not the best one, is the plaque that was offered to the Council to Aid the Jews, Żegota, in the center of Krakow in Jagiellońska Street. This plaque commemorates the fact that Żegota's headquarters were located in the center of Krakow, in this street. However, they use a very vague estimation of number of Jews they helped. So we are facing here the information that Żegota helped thousands of Jews to survive Holocaust. This is the information that of course needs some further research, and based on the current research we know about some examples of helping Jews, but as one of the historians researching on the topic, we are not sure if this can be called many thousands of Krakowian Jews. It's important. This plaque is important also because it's in the center of Krakow. There are not so many commemoration plaques related to anything Jewish in the center of Krakow. Even the commemoration of righteous among the nations are not present in such central locations, except maybe some efforts, initiatives, actions by the former Historical Museum of the City of Krakow, now the Museum of Krakow, which got involved over the time in various projects to commemorate the Holocaust, to commemorate particularly some aspects of the Holocaust in Krakow. And it developed into the history trail or commemoration trail, the set of several units of the museum devoted to some aspects of the Holocaust. One of them that was active very early is Pomorska Street, the branch of the museum located in the former Gestapo cells, prison, and it's to some extent also showing the Jewish part of this story. Then the pharmacy under the eagle was taken over by the museum and changed at least 3 times. So what we see today, it's different from the very first exhibition in the 80s. And the last major project was undertaken at the beginning of the 21st century. In 2007, the museum in the Schindler's factory started, the works of the museum started, and it was opened in 2010. And as we know, it shows the history of occupied Krakow with a lot of sections devoted to the fate of the Jews in Krakow, and I'm glad that the museum is continuing the work, and right now one of the branches of the museum is continuing the works on the exhibition on Jews in Podgórze. So we'll see the history of Jews in Podgórze before the ghetto was established. We have to also understand that the beginning of the works on these museums was happening in a very difficult time of transformation, and some of the historical sites were not in a very good condition. Nevertheless, since 1980s, the first, I would call them civic efforts, started to commemorate the ghetto, to commemorate the Holocaust. One of them was the March of Remembrance that started in the late 1980s as the initiative by individuals, by the group of individuals, and it developed into more organized event. And here we have some examples of the March of Remembrance from the decades, most of them from the late 1980s and early 21st century. The late 1980s was also the time when the Jewish Culture Festival started in 1988, and within the framework of the festival there was always the time to commemorate the ghetto, to commemorate the Holocaust, to discuss difficult issues of the past. But for me, one of the most meaningful parts of the Jewish festival is the ceremony that is repeated yearly. It's Zachor, the ceremony to commemorate Krakowian Jews, and it's basically devoted to the victims of the Holocaust. I include the picture of the ceremony this year. Each year it's very meaningful, and unfortunately each year we have less and less survivors with us. Talking about the commemoration of the ghetto and the Holocaust in Krakow wouldn't be possible without mentioning the impact of one film production that led to many other film productions that impacted not just the local community but also people all around the world. It's Schindler's List, the movie that was produced in Krakow, at least in major part, and it was released in 1993. For the local community, but also for the international community, it was the very powerful, although Hollywood, a reminder of what happened in Krakow. The film itself created also some confusion because some of the scenes from the film were filmed in different locations than originally. Nevertheless, the message is quite meaningful, and the awareness of the history of Krakowian Jews, the history of the Krakow ghetto, the history of Plaszów camp changed dramatically. It's interesting to look at some of the elements of the film, like the gate to the ghetto that was recreated as part of the film scenography in completely different location. In fact, it was in Divorce Street, not far from here, leading to Szeroko Street. This huge construction that in the film played the gate to the ghetto for a short time became like temporary memorial. I know it was very confusing, but it was for the local people, it was like a dramatic reminder of what happened. So there were many other cases like this. The fragments of ghetto walls were built, the reconstruction, stenography, however you name it, were built in various parts of Kazimierz, and I looked carefully at every single second of the film, and I spotted several fragments included in the film that were around Szeroka Street. The film itself had also, I can talk about the film for hours, so I would try to make myself very short when discussing the film. I would like to emphasize one impact on the local memory and commemoration of the Holocaust. The film was, when it was produced, it included the stories of the local Jews. Steven Spielberg himself was in Krakow for a couple of weeks, and he almost every day he was trying to meet someone from the local community. He talked to the survivors, and he was shocked that some of them were talking about their experiences for the first time. If you can imagine a survivor of the ghetto talking about the ghetto experience for the first time in sort of public setting in the early 1990s, it tells you a lot about the silence that was present here in Krakow, especially among some of the survivors. So it was encouraging local Jews to talk more openly about the past, to uncover, if we can call it like this, the Jewish stories. It acted as the encouragement also to publish, to write and publish books, testimonies, memories, all kinds of books, including some proper scholarly research on Oskar Schindler himself. Within the wave of commemoration of the late 1980s and early 90s, there were other initiatives to put the plaques or put the memorials dedicated to Jews of Krakow. One of them is located not far from here in Szeroka Street. It was donated, or it was founded by the Nisenbaum Family Foundation. The location of it is probably not the most relevant to the location of the Holocaust sites or Holocaust-related sites. However, this memorial, dedicated to 65,000 of Krakowian Jews who perished during the Holocaust, is in the void, in the emptiness of Jewish life in Szeroka Street. This street used to be crowded with local Jews. After the Second World War, the set of inhabitants dramatically changed, and right now only the synagogues that are open, a couple of Jewish institutions fill in the void. I don't like this memorial myself, and I will explain why. Because of this 65,000, it indicates that all pre-war Jews perished during the Holocaust. That's how it's being understood by most of the people who see it, because they learn in most of the textbooks that there were 65,000 Jews living in Krakow before the Second World War, and then we have the memorial commemorating 65,000. So it's indicating that all perished. We know that not all Krakowian Jews perished. We have one of the examples here. I think we have to remember that there was also a part of the community that survived, that continued activities in Krakow, and this part of the community was also responsible for some forms of commemoration. Moving into the 21st century, I would like to just give you some examples also about the later initiatives to commemorate the ghetto, to commemorate some aspects of the history of the ghetto in the public spaces. And of course, one of the major projects that happened at the beginning of the 21st century was changing the character of Ghetto Heroes Square, Plac Bohaterów Getta. It was the long discussion what to do with the square, how to commemorate the past, how to include the commemoration into the urban space. And the project that was finally chosen, the project by Lewicki and Łatak Architects Studio, proved to be one of the best possible forms of commemorating the place, although not without some mistakes, and I mean the lack of some information about the place. But the powerful impact of the construction compensates the lack of information board. And I would like to mention that this project was realized in the years 2004-2005, and since then the urban space around the Ghetto Heroes Square has changed completely, and the new forms of commemorating the ghetto space encourage also local artists to work on the past, but including the present. And this is one of the installations by Bartolomeo Koszenarz, the local artist, who put this installation in the streets of Ghetto. And for me, it was really powerful to see the double image, the past and the present, in the same location. There is still a lack of commemorating the sites of the gates to the ghetto, but when I was looking for any traces of the gates, I came across the local commemoration of the past with the photograph. And this is the photograph of St. Joseph's Church, which was just around the corner from the ghetto in Podgórski Square. And when I looked very carefully at this photograph, I realized that although it shows only the church and the square, there is a tram passing by. And on the tram, there is a commercial for Jakub Gross's shop. So by commemorating this place in the historical context, they also commemorate the Jewish presence in the city, which in this particular location is very meaningful, that Jewish past, Jewish life is included. I would like to also mention, when talking about the commemoration, some initiatives by Galicia Jewish Museum in cooperation with various institutions. And one of them, which I'm not very objective about, is the initiative to commemorate the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto in the public space of the center of Krakow. Together with the group of people from Galicia Jewish Museum and the students of Jewish Studies, we organized in 2011 sort of happening. We published kind of obituaries with the names of the people who were deported to the ghetto, and we posted them, the information that this and this person was deported to the ghetto, on the door of the house where the person used to live. So it was considered as the very local reminder to the inhabitants of the neighborhoods that there were Jews living there who were taken to the ghetto, and in most cases they perished. And this commemoration was very temporary, because it lasted for a day, 2, maybe 3, maybe a week. Most of these papers were taken away, but nevertheless, it was very meaningful to see the reaction to it. Some people embracing the fact and being surprised, being shocked, but learning the fact. Some people denying it, we don't want it to be here. We don't want this kind of commemoration. I think with the time, the consciousness, the awareness of what happened to Krakowian Jews increased enormously, and with every exhibition, with every project here, we see the difference. We could see the impact the recent exhibition had, the Sweet Home Suite, but we also still see the results of of much older projects, including the project in cooperation with Katarzyna Zimmerer, who is still here. The project that was based on commemoration plaques in the ghetto, commemorating various institutions within the ghetto structure, and then organizing tours, organizing lectures and events commemorating those places. So this project in the years 2012 to 2013 is still continues in some way, because there are people walking around the ghetto and they see the plaques, they learn the history through the plaques. And of course, as Katarzyna didn't present the books, I have the privilege and honor to remind you of the significant works on the ghetto and the Holocaust in Krakow, published by Katarzyna Zimmerer. And the title of the most recent one, The Chronicle of the Martyred World, is really a powerful day-to-day account of what happened in Krakow during the German Nazi occupation, what happened to the local Jews. And just to get closer to my final comments, I would like to give some examples from the places that are a little bit farther from the center. Nevertheless, they are part of the history of Krakowian Jews, meaning the location of Plaszów camp, concentration camp Plaszów. The commemoration of Plaszów is very complicated. Over the recent decades, it was the ground of, I would say, competing memories, conflicting memories of the destruction, of the lack of respect to some extent. But when it comes to commemorating the Jews, there are several elements that needs to be mentioned. First of all, the first and till today still the main memorial dedicated to Jews only. Not the big memorial from the 1960s, very generally mentioned as the memorial to the victims of the fascist terror, but this one that you see right now is dedicated to the Jews of Krakow, with the emphasis on the word Jews, on the fact that those people were martyred because of being Jews, and here we see the details in Polish and Hebrew as well. The memory of Jewish prisoners of Plaszów camp is changing over the past few years. It all comes with much more intensified education about this place, much more present memory among local people, and the increase in memory of the Jews is accompanied but also diminishing the presence of any locations or symbols of Nazi occupation, Nazi German occupation, the disappearing of places such as Amon Getz Villa, which became the private residence right now. All of that is part of the process, and the process led to the establishment of the Museum of Karl Plaszów, which was announced last year. And I will skip just one, moving to the last slide, that we talk about all the positive elements commemorating, of preserving the memorial sites, but I also have to mention that from time to time there are acts of vandalism and anti-Semitism that are present at the sites of ghetto and Holocaust commemoration. And one of the most common places that it's being invaded by such actions, it's the ghetto wall in Podgórze. So I think it's our duty to make sure that such acts of vandalism are punished or they do not happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fascinating presentation on memory and non-memory. Do we have any questions? Anybody would like to ask Dr. Krakow?
Thank you for the interesting presentation. I wondered if you mentioned this project of posting obituaries of reported to houses that they used to live in. Yes, of course. So you mentioned this project of posting obituaries to houses where the people used to live and still live correctly, but it was a temporary project, and I was wondering if there are any plans to make a permanent project out of this.
So these were the pieces of paper in the form of obituaries, which is quite important because we didn't put obituaries. We weren't sure if the people we mentioned perished. We just mentioned the fact of being deported to the ghetto. And of course, there were some efforts to commemorate the individuals who perished during the Holocaust. One of the initiatives is putting the stones in front of the buildings, which, and this is part of unsuccessful effort. Such projects of putting memory stones in front of the buildings of the individuals, it was denied, it was not allowed by the Institute of National Remembrance.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If it's not, I will take it again.
Krakowskim układała już mieszkał przedwojenną w Krakowie, gdyby nie to, że on mnie poganiał i weszł na mnie i tak dalej, to żadnych akcji nie było.
Thanks, Dr. Krakow, for mentioning the